For decades, we were promised that if we just let China have access to whatever it wanted and do whatever it wanted, well, then democracy would flourish. Wow, so much democracy! Of course, that didn't happen. America is finally getting real about how to deal with it. But if you really want to start making an impact on China and reindustrializing this country, we're going to need to do a lot more. We'll be discussing a new op-ed in Blaze News on this very subject. But first, conservatives have been talking about eliminating the Department of Education, also for decades. Well, today, the president took a big step in that direction.
Today, we take a very historic action that was 45 years in the making. In a few moments, I will sign an executive order to begin eliminating the Federal Department of Education once and for all.
Joining me now is the president of the American Principles Project and an incredible advocate on these sorts of issues, an NRA for the family sort of type, Terry Schilling, also a loud and rambunctious neighbor. Terry, thanks for joining the show.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
So, Terry, you were a witness to history earlier today. Let's start with the signing of this executive order tearing apart the Department of Education. Tell me about your trip there with your children and what it was kind of like, and what brought you and your family into that historic room on that historic moment.
Well, again, thanks so much for having me, Chris. I always love talking with you. Today is a historic day. It's the day that President Trump didn't just follow through on one of his dozens of campaign promises. That wouldn't be abnormal at this point. He's followed through on every promise so far. But this is the first time since the Department of Education was founded in 1979 that it's actually been rolled back and dismantled. The conservatives have been talking about this for quite some time. We know
Forever.
that the Department
like Barry
of Education...
Goldwater.
Yeah, no, I
don't think it goes back that far, but
no, it's 1979. It was done by Jimmy Carter, but it's been an abject failure, right? We've seen educational progress not just stall; it's going backwards. 50% of every dollar goes to administration costs. The Department of Education hasn't helped us educate our children, or get more people to the moon, or expand America's abilities to innovate and invent things. It's actually just led to more bureaucracy. And only, by the way, a third of our kids can read at grade level, do math at grade level.
That's shocking.
It's absolutely appalling.
That's Civil War levels.
It is Civil War levels, and I think that a lot of the people that have been a part of this have actually been working towards building some civil unrest and getting to that point. They want some type of weird revolution. But the reality is that I got invited here today, I think in large part because 4 years ago, I pulled my children out of Fairfax County Public Schools, not because they were teaching my kids woke things, that would have been enough, but because they weren't teaching them how to read or do math. The public education system is failing, right? And it's, I can put up with the garbage, I can teach my kids to laugh and mock and ridicule the ridiculous, but I can't, it's really tough for me to teach them how to read and write. Like that is what schools are meant to do, and they're doing everything except those things.
Fairfax County is one of the worst. I mean, I join you in having to pay for private schools, which aren't always the cheapest, even when you go the Catholic school route. But what does this Department of Education, or what does dismantling the Department of Education look like? When people hear that, they might be a little spooked and say, well, we're not going to educate anymore? But you kind of teased a little bit there about what they actually do. So what would dismantling it, how would that play out for the American public?
Well, the reality is that the federal government only accounts for about 10 to 12%, depending on the school district and state, 10 to 12% of every education dollar. So the money really doesn't make it to the classroom. It's like $229 billion, and not very much of that actually makes it to the classroom. Most of it, 75% of that $229 billion goes to bureaucracy, administration, adding more costs to education. And it's been an abject failure. So what's going to happen now is that money will not be cut. They're not cutting education dollars, but it'll be dispersed through a different government agency. And before the Department of Education was founded, the money was given out through the Department of Health and Human Services. Right? And so the funding's not going to be cut. In fact, there will be more money making it directly to the classroom because there won't be as many strings attached. What a lot of Americans don't understand is that when the Department of Education gives out money, Every dollar has a string attached to it. You accept this dollar here, well, you have to start a new counseling program or an anti-bullying program or some type of after-school Satan club, something like that.
Anti-bullying and Satanism. I mean, I actually think bullying has kind of an important role to play in growing up. It certainly helps shape me.
As long as it doesn't go too far, it is important to allow children to enforce social norms. And I think enforcing social norms sometimes gets cast as bullying, which it can be. But anyway, we're going to cut the strings. We're going to get rid of bureaucracy. The biggest losers in this executive order are the administrators, the superintendents, the school boards, the people that have been using the Department of Education dollars and our tax dollars against us to hire their friends and institute new LGBTQ plus reading book programs.
What do they do with this? Is this just a large Ponzi scheme? Is this just a self-enrichment program off the taxpayer? Or are they also putting this money towards nefarious ends? I know that they're not educating. Like you said, the literacy and the math literacy rates are plummeting in this country in a very dangerous way.
No, that's right. And look, look, you'd be surprised at how badly things can go as if someone's not keeping watch and someone's not making sure that things are running on time and staying straight. But I can't help but think that because of how bad things are, this has all been deliberate. Right? We spend more per capita, per pupil, per student than any other country in the world, and yet only a third of our kids can do math at grade level or read or write at grade level. It's embarrassing. It has to be deliberate. You would do better just accidentally educating children on how to read and write. Like, this is abject failure. And these schools are doing nothing because the school boards have all been turned upside down. School boards, for example, before the Department of Education, school boards responded to voters, to parents. They were held accountable. The schools were held accountable by school boards. And now the teachers' unions, and through all the bureaucracy and extra funding that they get, they have turned the school boards against parents. They weaponize. If you're a parent that shows up at school board meetings under Biden administration, you get investigated as a domestic terrorist for voicing your First Amendment rights about your own children getting sexually assaulted in the bathroom where the school covers it up, right? That is how bad the Department of Education got things, to where the school boards were actually protecting the corrupt, protecting the abusers. And that's one of the reasons why it's so important to get rid of this thing and return power back to the parents and back to the states.
Yeah, I guess you were probably one of those parents, not unlike myself, because, I mean, you're busy. You've got 7 kids, 6 of whom were at the White House today. You're running around everywhere, but you had to have noticed during the beginning of COVID that something was funny coming through those Zoom calls, and maybe it was time to make a change on with the source of the education. But I know we're in a bit of a rush here, so I could talk to you about the subject all day, but I want to talk about an article you wrote for the Blaze on tariffs specifically. Let's throw it up here for a second. So your piece kind of lays out, well, you know what, I'll let you make your own case here. Why don't you, we got the author right here.
Listen, it's very clear. Donald Trump is doing so much to bring back America's manufacturing base and protect workers and working families specifically. But one thing that we haven't really heard a lot about is China's pollution. Right? A lot of people don't realize or connect the dots between America's EPA.
It's a filthy country.
It's a look, my dad had done business over there. He said you could smell the sulfur in the air as soon as the plane landed. Right? This is a country without any environmental regulations. And frankly, China does not care about the environment its citizens have to live in or about the environment for the rest of the world. They've killed tens of millions of their own people and starved them to death. Right? China wants to become great, and they're willing to kill all of us in order to do that. So we've got to, if we're going to have an EPA, which we need to have an EPA, we need to protect our environment, make sure that pollutants aren't getting into our rivers and airways and killing people and giving them cancer like they do in China. But we have to rein in China and get them to go along with basic environmental protections. Otherwise, what's going to happen is we're going to continue to lose jobs overseas to China and any other nation that does not protect our environment, or at least just play by some bare minimum basic rules that keep people from getting sick and getting cancer and dying, like my father did just 4 years ago.
Why does China making its own people sick matter to Americans? Is it the competition thing? Is it if their domestic policy impacts their own people, is this more about American industry's ability to compete with a polluting slave state, or is this more just about changing the balance of trade between the two countries? What's in it for the Americans?
Well, President Trump was spot on when he pointed this out several years ago, that all of these climate scams, all of these Green New Deals and these regulations to regulate carbon in America, they had to be some plot by the Chinese to steal the rest of our manufacturing base, because China produces the most pollution, the most carbon of any other nation in the entire world. They have the least amount of regulations. And so as America and all these other developed nations start to regulate carbon, and really it's a euphemism, a great euphemism for taxing businesses out of existence.
You're regulating
if they're going to go down this way,
life.
China shouldn't have that advantage over them. Right? And so we've got to, if you're going to do environmental protections, you have to first make sure that China does it. Otherwise, all of it's going to be for naught, and they would have just stolen all of our industry and turned us into worthless service economies like they've been doing for the past 40 years.
I tell you what, between the windmills and the fentanyl, they sure have gotten vengeance for that little opium war the English waged. But Terry Schilling, I know you got to run. It's great to have you. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.